But let's get into the real news, and that is free agent quarterback Marcus Mariota back to DC, a one-year deal. We don't have terms yet. Looking forward to seeing what those look like. But Mariota wanted to test the market, and I totally get it. There were a few landing spots where if he would have gotten there, he probably could have started games this year, maybe even right away in week one. I think the gig that everybody was looking for in that bridge quarterback tier was the Colts job. Anthony Richardson at one point last year asking out of a game, teammates in the locker room kind of turning on him, it seemed like, after that, and his coaching staff maybe even deciding in that moment, I'm not really sure if this is going where we need it to, in addition to the fact that he just hasn't played very well and he's been hurt a lot over the last couple of years. So there is a very clear path, a runway that is wide open for you to taking that job from him. But Daniel Jones at $14 million, who has won a playoff game for the Giants, who has had one really good season over the last 3 or 4 years, got the gig. Marcus Mariota did not. And so if you're Marcus and you start looking around and you're going, okay, the Raiders is a place maybe I could go compete, and then somebody ends up there, and then you go, well, the Colts would be nice. I could start there. And then a quarterback's landed there. Now you're looking at being a backup again. If you're going to be a backup, you like it here. You know Jayden Daniels well. It's a comfortable situation. The coaching staff loves you. Kingsbury sings your praises. Why go learn a new offense?
Yeah, I think he was super comfortable here. And I think, I was wrong. When they acquired him to be the backup quarterback, I think we kind of knew then there was going to be Jayden Daniels. It just, the styles matched. You could have him mentor him and kind of help him along. But I did not think that he was going to be someone that was going to be as good a mentor as he was for Jayden. I did not think, we watched that quarterback series on Netflix, and he quit on the Falcons, at the end of the season when he was no longer the starting quarterback. And normally when you do something like that, you don't just immediately get a redemption tour, but he did a really good job of coming in here, and he played well too, Grant, which is obviously a huge part of this. And he was able to step in, and, some of the games where Jayden didn't play well or Jayden got injured, Marcus stepped in and played probably better than Jayden did. You look at that Cowboys game.
Phenomenal. The last time we saw him was the Cowboys. His numbers, if you look back, that's Daniels in a good half. 15 of 18 for $160 and 2 touchdowns without turning the ball over. And if you remember, he had that 30-yard run on a fourth and a foot or two to set up a 1st and goal for them to put the game back in reach, where they scored the game-winning touchdown. He threw it to McLaurin in the closing seconds. That was Daniels making that play with his feet and making that throw to Terry at the end of the game all year long. And it's how he became a folk hero in this town.
Yeah.
Well, the one time they needed to do it without Jayden, they still did it.
Well,
which I think speaks to Cliff. It speaks to the offense, everyone around him. Everyone acted like Jayden Daniels was just Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill. How does anyone ever move 1 yard in this offense? They all can't walk and put pants on and chew gum. Bunch of losers. And thank God for Jayden Daniels. Yes, Daniels is great. Also, can you give him a little bit of credit, please? When he wasn't in there, Mariota lit up the Panthers. They scored 40, and he lit up the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that Panthers game, we talked about this with that Eagles game where Jalen Hurts was out, and we're talking about the legitimacy of the win and did it count or not. Obviously, the Eagles are a much better team than Carolina, but Washington went without their quarterback and still hung 40.
Yep.
Right? So, there's still ways to go around it and do things. So it was really impressive that when he went out, you didn't feel like the offense fell off hugely. Mariota could execute still. And that's something that's really nice to have. And on top of that, the thing that really pushed me over the top in favor of Mariota is the clip from the Falcons game where in overtime, Jayden's keeled over. And the thing about that is Jayden's fine. He knows he's fine. But the important part of this, and I think Mariota understood it, is I need the other 52 people on the team to know you're fine. Because if I'm Sam Cosmi at right guard, if I know you're fine, we're going to win this game.
Maybe not even just your own team, but the opponent is seeing you doubled over. For people that don't remember the clip, Daniels, it was when he was in hero mode. So he's putting the team on his back, and he's doing this high school football bit, like he's playing in West Texas, and Dad's watching for the first time in a few years because he's been traveling,
Yeah.
But now he's here, so I got to show him how good I am. So Jayden was out there, and he's just doing this thing where, Cliff called the play. That's funny. I'm getting the ball, and I'm running left, and then I'm running right, and then I'm running left. And I've honestly, at the NFL level, really haven't seen anything like that in terms of the play has never mattered less. This is just straight up backyard football at this point in overtime. And Daniels is just doing some Lamar Jackson wacky, where I'm going to the goal line. If you guys want to go down there too, you can. But that's where I'm going to be. And so he gets clobbered trying to get in. And they call timeout. I'm sure he lost his breath or whatever, and he's just gassed. But he's doubled over like on a knee as if he looks spent. And Mariota comes over and he just kind of very calmly and quietly in his ear. And to your point, Toby, it's kind of the opposite of what you would have imagined for a guy that we all saw on that Netflix series quarterback just walked out on a team and quit, and he seemed like a bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, he just randomly disappeared for the last couple of episodes. Like, they're finishing week 16, 17, 18, and Mariota's gone.
And he did that to the team. He basically said, like, I'm gone. See you guys later.
Yeah.
Because he'd been benched. And how dare I sit here and watch Desmond Ridder play? I'm not going to watch that loser. I'm going to go hang out with my baby and my kid and my wife. So anyway, so he comes out onto the field, and he's like tapping Jayden. He's like, stand up. He's like, get your breath. Like, go back in there. You got this. And it was just this little pep talk that if Dan Quinn said it, he's yelling. That's fine. But a quarterback who's won a Heisman, who's gone number 2 overall, who was you at one point.
Correct.
Never quite as talented as Jayden Daniels. So you take the faders from Daniels and you turn them all down a little bit. Whereas Daniels had 50 touchdowns in the SEC. Nobody's ever done that. He ran for 1,000 yards. Marcus Mariota was a dude. Like, people sleep a little bit. Go back and watch the tape at Oregon. Go back and watch highlights of him with the Ducks. He was a badass. And before Jayden went to as a Heisman Trophy winner, he did. And I do think because of that, when he is talking with Jayden in the room, it probably matters a little more.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's the thing is you bring in a guy that is essentially Jayden before Jayden. Like you said, not nearly as talented as a passer, but as a runner, he's really good. Similar play styles, number 2 overall picks, expected to kind of turn over a franchise that wasn't very good before they got there. Obviously didn't work for Mariota in Tennessee, but he even had some good moments there, right? You remember the play that he had when he threw the ball, or what was it exactly? Did it get batted up and then he caught it and ran it in for a touchdown in a playoff game? Like, he's had some good moments as well, but to see that leadership, and like you said, you know, when you talk about coaches, they talk about this all the time for good football teams, it's player led, right? You have to have the buy-in from the players and those guys kind of helping each other. When you have a guy like Mariota who's gone through what Jayden has gone through, obviously not nearly as successfully, but it means a little more because there's not many guys you can bring in. Like, they had Jeff Driscoll. Jeff Driscoll can't relate to what Jayden's going through, where he's got everything on his shoulders trying to fix a team.
Here's what they have in common. They're both quarterbacks, and they're both kind of in the NFL.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. And so having Mariota there to say, hey, man, I've gone through this. This is what I learned. This is how I can help. And I think the good part was you can tell just by that interaction, Mariota's not pushing it. He's going to let Jayden do his thing. When he feels like he needs to step in, he understands that he's a better football player than him. He understands that. So he's not going to say, hey, do this, do this, do this. I'm just helping out.
This, to me, is a sneaky big deal. Like, we joke that it's not on the Danny Rouillet missing work threshold of a bombshell. But I do think this is significant for 2 reasons. One, they needed a backup quarterback if he left. And that means someone's got to come in here, obviously, and learn an offense, right? But on top of that, I know Daniels proved durable last season, and that was amazing. I am not ready, as I sit here today on March 12th, 25, to tell you that I fully expect Jayden Daniels to be a durable quarterback. After watching how he plays last year, I think it is stunning that he played in every single game. I think I would take the under on 16.5 most seasons for him. And maybe, hopefully, it's 15 or 16, and it's a concussion protocol or, sore ribs here or there. The fact that he played through what we now think was probably a broken rib or a cracked rib or whatever, he probably should have missed a game or 2. It's actually strange looking back that he didn't. It's a little bit odd to me that they didn't have him sit against the Chicago Bears. And he ended up in that game, obviously throwing the Hail Mary to win it. So it's a pretty good thing that they didn't. But there was a stretch there where he was not Jayden Daniels like. There was that month where he was playing at a lesser level, where he was very pedestrian, and it probably cost him a chance at the MVP, if we're being honest. Because let's face it, Tobes, if he played those few games like he had the rest of the year, I think he squarely would have been in the most valuable player conversation, and Washington probably would have even had a better record. But your backup's probably going to play. And the way Mariota played is the second part here. He was amazing.
Yes. He
was 33 of 41. 4 touchdowns, no picks, completed 80% of passes, and he provided playmaking with his legs.
Yeah, and I think, the nice part is when you make a guy like Mariota your backup, when you have Jayden as the quarterback too, it makes it easier on Cliff. He doesn't have to change the offense. There are some aspects of Mariota that he's not going to be able to replicate Jayden, obviously.
They ran the same stuff.
But they run the exact same stuff. And if anything, you almost feel more comfortable. You don't want to go to your third quarterback, but having that third guy, you almost feel more comfortable running some of those quarterback powers and stuff. You're like, you know what? If this guy goes down, we have another guy we can step in, but we can be a little more aggressive in some ways with that. So they're not having to change anything major versus, if you had someone back there like, Colt McCoy for years, you'd have to change things up a little bit. He's going to play a little more from the pocket versus having Mariota step in. It's seamless, not only for, Mariota stepping into Jayden's shoes there in the field, but it's easier for Cliff. The offense doesn't have to change everybody else. So it's kind of a nice way to have where that backup just steps in, and for him to play at the level that he did, you almost, a lot of times when the backup steps in, you're like, oh no. But with Mariota, it was like, okay, we're still good.
Yeah, you didn't feel that way. And that's the greatest compliment I think you can give a backup quarterback. I also think that your QB2 just matters more when you've got a QB that is one of the leaders in the league in rushing. Near the weight of Daniels, which I think he partially put to bed last season, although I think even that's debatable because of the injury that he suffered.
Well, look at Lamar. Tyler Huntley, we talk about how much of a joke the Pro Bowl is. Tyler Huntley went to a Pro Bowl because he had to fill in when Lamar got hurt.
I think he played like 2 games, and then 11 quarterbacks said they didn't want to go to Orlando, so he made the Pro Bowl.
I know, it's ridiculous, but the point is they have to have a good backup quarterback in Baltimore because every single year the discussion is, can Lamar stay healthy? Jayden's proved it for a year. It's still going to be something that follows him around just because of his size. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, if we're down the line and he's only missed, a couple of games, maybe the discussion kind of goes. But just looking at a dude that size, you still you feel better now than you did when they drafted him. There's no doubt about that. But it's not like you feel like, oh, Josh Allen's back there like it's Tank.
So that's a good way to put it. I feel better about the chance that Jayden Daniels can be a durable quarterback than I did 1 year ago at this time, unequivocally. But I am not willing to say that after last year I am confident or that he proved that he can stay healthy. He was compromised for a quarter of a season because he took a really big shot at the end of an awkward fall while running for 40-plus yards against Carolina. There was basically a 4-game run there where he was compromised. That's about 25% of the season. So if that is the season people are pointing to, saying, I told you he could play a whole year, he kept playing.
The only reason,
but he was not Jayden Daniels for several weeks.
The only reason I feel better, like long-term, than probably you do is the reason he got hurt was kind of fluky. Like
but it's always going to be fluky.
But that's my point. Like if he's running around and he gets hit and it's because he's not protecting himself, then that to me is something that if you can't get that out of him, then he's going to get hurt. Like that.
But Robert Griffin was fluky.
But fluky injuries happen. I get that. But that happens to anybody. That happens to
it happens more when you run more than every other quarterback.
Sure. But I just feel like if it's fluky injuries, there's nothing you can do. It's going to happen.
See, I disagree because I think when you run as much as he does, the chance of what you're calling fluky, which is just being tackled in the open field, that's what we're calling fluky. When Griffin's diving and his leg wraps around Haloti Ngata, that doesn't happen when you're standing in the pocket. So you can also get hurt there, by the way.
Sure.
And Tom Brady did, who had cinder blocks for feet, and he missed an entire season with a torn ACL. I'm not suggesting that's not the case, but you do have a much better chance, just generally, of being durable if you stand in the pocket. My actual fear for Jayden last year was more him getting basically swallowed up by a 340-pound defensive tackle and landed on in the Tony Romo collarbone thing.
Sure, yeah.
Because he's a slender guy, and that never really happened because nobody could really catch him when he can see you. He does a good job avoiding contact in that way. But I'm not willing to say after last year, because he played in every game, that he proved that, that's going to happen every year. I think each season's different. How many times the first home game against the Giants, he came to the sideline, got treatment, Mariota's warming up, he goes back in. What I learned last year is that he's unbelievably tough. What I learned last year is that it's going to be hard as hell to get him off the field. Not that he is above injuries.
What scares me is that maybe he's just that lucky guy, and at some point that luck is going to run out. Because the one that always sticks in my head, and I have no idea how he just ran back out on the field and kept rolling, is that Falcons hit.
The Gumby leg play.
He's bent backwards, and I was in the stands with your brother watching the game, and it was like, oh no, here we go again. It's the same stupid thing again, and he just popped back up and was ready to roll again. I don't know how he was fine from that, and there are a bunch of hits where I think for the most part, you didn't have too many of the crazy LSU hits where he's jumping over the line and he's getting blasted out of like he didn't have as many of those. I thought he protected himself much better. But the fluky ones are what's going to scare you. And to your point, when you have a quarterback that is going to run the ball as much, if not more, than anybody else in the National Football League, you open that risk up. But I also will take that risk with the ability of him being able to just be so much more explosive and so hard to stop compared to every other quarterback.
I also think that scrambling, and this is just a theory, right? I have nothing to back this up. I'd have to study it. But like scrambling, which he did at a rate that far exceeded anybody else, like not even close, is actually more dangerous maybe than the designed run when it's outside. Like Cliff Kingsbury, I think he toned it down. But early in the year, they were doing the design stuff between the tackles at the goal line. And those were some of the biggest hits he was taking.
Yeah, no doubt.
And thank God they stopped doing that. But generally, when you design a run, meaning you've got some blockers in front, oftentimes it's into space. You can use the sideline as your friend. You can get down on the ground easier. When you're scrambling, there is a suddenness and just a spontaneity to that. There's guys in different positions on the field. You don't have a lead blocker with you. Like that can be a little bit scarier too.